It was a bright afternoon in the middle of a buzzing tech conference. People from all over the world had gathered in a massive auditorium to hear from the biggest names in technology. The room was filled with energy, anticipation, and excitement. Everyone was waiting for the one and only Elon Musk to take the stage and speak about the future of tech. As the lights dimmed and the audience quieted down, Elon made his grand entrance. People clapped and cheered as he walked up to the podium. His reputation for bold ideas and groundbreaking inventions had earned him a huge following. But on this particular day, something very unusual happened. While everyone was focused on Elon, their eyes glued to the stage, a strange figure caught his attention. It was a man standing near the back of the auditorium. At first, Elon thought it was just another person in the crowd, blending in with the rest. But as he looked closer, something about the man made him pause. The man was different. His clothes were dirty, his hair messy, and he looked like he had been through a lot. His eyes, however, were what caught Elon's attention the most. They were filled with something Elon couldn't quite describe. Maybe sadness, maybe hope. It was a look that felt out of place in such a grand event. Elon, usually calm and collected, felt a strange pull toward the man. As he continued with his speech, the audience's cheers faded into the background for him. His mind kept drifting back to that man in the crowd. Who was he? Why was he there? What was his story? It wasn't that Elon hadn't seen people like him before. Homelessness, poverty, and hardship were sadly a part of every city. But there was something different about this encounter. The man wasn't just someone Elon could easily forget. No, there was something about him that sparked Elon's curiosity. In the midst of discussing new ideas and projects, Elon found himself distracted. His thoughts wandered back to that man in the crowd. Was he just someone who got lost in the shuffle, or was there more to his presence at the event than it seemed? Elon's mind raced with questions. What had happened in the man's life? How had he ended up in this situation? Elon quickly shook his head, trying to refocus on the speech. But even as he spoke, a part of his attention remained on that man. What was he doing here, in the middle of such a glamorous and well-organized event? The more Elon thought about it, the more the question lingered in his mind. Was this some sort of sign, or just a random event in a world full of chaos? It wasn't like Elon to let his focus slip during a speech. But today was different. He couldn't stop thinking about the stranger in the crowd. And little did anyone know, this strange encounter was about to lead to something that would shock everyone in the room. As Elon continued with his speech, the words started to blend together. His voice echoed through the auditorium, but his thoughts were far from the audience or the topic at hand. His attention was once again drawn to the man at the back of the room, standing motionless, like he didn't belong. The man was far from the polished crowd of tech experts and innovators. He was rough around the edges, his clothes torn and his appearance unkempt. Yet there was something about him that made Elon pause. For a moment, Elon wondered how someone like that could have ended up in such an upscale event. The homeless man didn't seem like he was interested in the latest technology or billion-dollar ideas. But as Elon kept glancing over, he realized that there was more to this man than met the eye. His eyes, they were full of something, emotion, maybe even hope. There was a tiredness to them, as if the man had lived through so much pain and struggle that it had worn him down. But there was also something else, a glimmer of resilience, a spark of life that refused to fade. It was the type of look that said, "I may be broken, but I'm still here." Elon found himself thinking about this man more and more. What was his story? How did he end up in the middle of such a grand event when he didn't seem to fit in at all? It was a strange thought, one that Elon couldn't shake off. He had met countless people throughout his life. Tech geniuses, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. But this man, with his disheveled appearance and weary eyes, stood out more than anyone else in the room. In the middle of his thoughts, Elon almost missed a crucial point in his speech. He quickly regained his focus, but the man in the crowd remained at the back of his mind. It wasn't just that Elon felt sympathy for the man. It was more than that. There was a connection, an unspoken recognition that Elon couldn't explain. It was as if their lives had crossed paths for a reason. Elon, known for his sharp mind and ability to solve complex problems, couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to help this man. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence that he had appeared at this event today. Maybe there was something that Elon could do. The idea of giving the man a chance of offering him help grew stronger in Elon's mind. He had seen people overcome the odds before, people who had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged victorious. Maybe this man, despite his rough exterior, had a story of his own that deserved to be heard. As Elon's speech came to an end, he couldn't help but glance over once more at the man standing quietly in the back. The man hadn't moved. He was still there, and Elon's curiosity had reached a boiling point. Something inside him told him that he needed to speak to this man, to learn more about him. But what could he say? What could he do? As the lights in the auditorium began to come up, Elon made a decision. He wasn't going to let this moment slip by. He was going to find out who this man was. There was more to this story than he could ignore, and he wasn't about to let it go. As the event wrapped up, the crowd began to move, excitedly talking about the latest announcements and ideas they had just heard from Elon Musk. But for Elon, the conference was no longer at the top of his mind. The only thing that kept running through his thoughts was the man at the back of the room. What had drawn him to that homeless figure in the crowd? What had made him so unforgettable? Elon stood there for a moment, allowing the buzz of the room to fill his ears. He had just shared his vision for the future of technology, yet it felt as though a different kind of challenge was standing in front of him. A challenge that had nothing to do with his companies, but everything to do with human lives, and the stories that often go unnoticed. He knew that he couldn't just walk away. There was something in the homeless man's eyes that haunted him. Elon had spent his life solving problems, whether it was making electric cars more accessible or reaching for the stars with SpaceX. But this was different. This was a problem he hadn't prepared for, but he knew he had to find a solution. Without thinking twice, Elon made a decision that would surprise everyone. He turned to his security team, who were still stationed near the exits, watching for any signs of trouble. "Go to that man in the back," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "Bring him to me." His security team hesitated for a moment. They were used to dealing with crowds, but this wasn't something they had been trained for. However, they knew better than to question Elon's instincts. They moved quickly, weaving through the crowd, heading toward the man who had caught Elon's attention. The audience, still buzzing from the speech, had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. Most of them were lost in their own conversations, not even noticing the security team making their way to the back of the room. Elon watched them move, his heart beating faster with anticipation. He didn't know what would happen next, but he felt a sense of urgency, like time was running out. The homeless man needed to be reached, needed to be seen for who he really was, beyond the ragged clothes and tired eyes. Moments later, Elon watched as the man was gently escorted toward him. The man seemed confused, unsure of what was happening. He had probably never imagined he would be singled out in such a way. His eyes darted nervously as he was guided to the front of the stage, where Elon waited. When the man finally stood before Elon, there was an awkward silence. Elon took a deep breath. This was the moment when everything would change. But what was he supposed to say? How should he begin? Elon looked the man in the eyes and smiled warmly, breaking the silence. "I've been wondering," he said calmly, "what brings someone like you to an event like this?" The homeless man looked around, clearly nervous. He didn't speak right away, but Elon's gentle tone made him feel a bit more comfortable. The crowd, sensing something extraordinary was happening, hushed. Elon continued, "You don't look like you belong here, but I believe there's more to you than meets the eye. So tell me your story." The moment had arrived. The man's face softened, and he began to speak, opening up in a way he hadn't done in years. Elon listened intently, eager to understand the truth behind the man's journey. The homeless man stood in front of Elon, unsure of what to say at first. His eyes darted nervously around the room, still trying to process the fact that Elon Musk, one of the most famous people in the world, was talking to him. For a moment, it felt like a dream, too surreal to be real. But Elon's calm and kind demeanor helped him relax just a little. The crowd in the auditorium had grown quiet. Everyone could sense that something unusual was happening. This wasn't just another routine interaction. It felt like the beginning of something important. All eyes were on Elon and the man in front of him, waiting to see what would unfold next. Elon smiled gently at the homeless man, trying to make him feel at ease. "I know this must be unexpected," Elon said softly, "but I want to hear your story. I want to know who you are and what brought you here." The man took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Elon's words. It wasn't every day that someone like him, someone who had been forgotten by most of society, was asked to share their life. But something in Elon's eyes told him that he could trust him, that he could speak without fear of being judged. "Well," the man began, his voice shaky but steady, "I wasn't always like this. I had a job once, a family, and dreams. But life hasn't been kind to me." He paused, swallowing hard, his emotions threatening to break through. "I lost my job years ago. The economy crashed, and I couldn't keep up. One thing led to another, and soon I found myself on the streets." Elon listened closely, his expression thoughtful. He could see the man's pain and the burden of lost hope in his eyes. It wasn't just about the job he had lost. It was about the life he had once dreamed of, now shattered. "I tried to pick myself up," the man continued. "But it's hard when the world just keeps pushing you down. I don't have family anymore. I don't have anyone." His voice broke slightly, and for a moment, he looked away as if ashamed. Elon's heart ached for him. He had met many people in his life, people with incredible achievements, brilliant ideas, and endless potential. But this man, standing before him, had been fighting a battle of a different kind. A battle that no one could see, a fight against the deep loneliness and struggle of survival. "Do you ever think about what could be next?" Elon asked gently, trying to bring a glimmer of hope into the conversation. The man looked at him, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know," he said. "It's hard to think about the future when you're just trying to make it through the day. I never thought I'd be here, talking to someone like you." Elon nodded, understanding the depth of the man's feelings. He knew how easy it was for people to fall into despair, especially when life seemed to have given up on them. But this was where Elon knew he could make a difference. He could offer more than just sympathy. He could offer a chance. "You're here now," Elon said with a quiet but firm conviction. "And that's all that matters. I think you've got a lot more to give than you realize." The man blinked, unsure of what Elon meant. But before he could ask, Elon added, "I want to help you. I believe that with the right opportunity, you could do something amazing. Something that could change your life." The crowd watched in silence, sensing that this was the turning point of the conversation. Elon had just offered something far greater than anyone expected, not just compassion, but a real chance for change. The homeless man stood in front of Elon, his eyes wide in disbelief. What Elon had just said, the offer to help, the suggestion that he could do something amazing, seemed like a dream. For so long, the man had been stuck in a world where survival was his only focus. He hadn't dared to think about anything beyond the next meal or finding a safe place to sleep. But here, in front of him, was someone who was offering him a chance at a new life. The thought of it was almost too much for him to take in. He had been ignored by most people for so long, and now Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world, was standing in front of him, offering help. Elon could see the shock and confusion in the man's eyes. He knew this wasn't something the man had ever expected. In fact, he probably didn't know what to say or how to react. But Elon didn't want the man to feel overwhelmed. Instead, he smiled warmly and spoke again. "I'm serious," Elon said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I believe that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild, no matter where they start. And I think you have the potential to do great things. You just need the right opportunity." The homeless man opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had so many questions, but none of them seemed to matter. How could he even begin to accept such an offer? What would it mean for his life? He had spent so long surviving on the streets that he hadn't thought about anything else. This was a new world, a world that he never thought he'd be a part of. "I know it's a lot to take in," Elon said, understanding the man's hesitation. "But let's start small. I want to help you get back on your feet. I'll take care of everything: food, shelter, medical help, and even a job. I think you'd be a good fit for one of my companies, or we could find something else that fits you better. The point is, you don't have to struggle alone anymore." The man's eyes started to well up with tears. He didn't know how to respond. He had spent so many years feeling invisible, like no one cared about him. But here, in front of him, was a person who was offering him something more valuable than anything he could have imagined: hope. I don't know what to say," the man finally whispered, his voice shaking. "This is just too much. I never thought I'd get a second chance like this." Elon nodded, his expression soft. "That's because most people don't see the potential in others when they're down. But I do. I see someone who deserves to have a real shot, and I'm offering you that chance." The crowd in the auditorium had been watching quietly, captivated by the interaction between Elon and the homeless man. Most of them were in awe of what was happening. They had expected a typical speech, but instead they had witnessed something far more powerful: a moment of humanity. Elon looked at the man once more and said, "Let's start by getting you cleaned up, fed, and rested. After that, we can talk about what comes next. I promise you, there's a future waiting for you. You just have to take the first step." The homeless man nodded slowly, still in shock. He couldn't believe this was happening. For the first time in years, he felt like someone saw him for who he truly was: someone with potential, someone who deserved a chance. And with that, the first step of his new journey had begun. The next few days felt like a whirlwind to the homeless man. Everything had changed so quickly, and it was hard for him to believe that this was really happening. Just days ago, he had been wandering the streets, unsure of where his next meal would come from. And now he was in a completely different world, a world filled with possibilities he had never imagined. Elon had kept his promise. The man was given a place to stay in a quiet, comfortable apartment, far from the chaos and danger of the streets. A team of professionals was arranged to help him with basic needs, like food and medical care. It wasn't just about giving him a roof over his head. It was about giving him a chance to heal, to feel like a person again. The man had spent so long in survival mode that he didn't know where to start. Everything felt new and strange, like he was in a dream. But Elon's team was there, guiding him every step of the way. They helped him with everything, from making sure he had enough to eat to providing mental health support. The man began to realize just how much he had been missing out on by living in survival mode for so long. One of the first things that amazed him was how good it felt to have a clean bed, a warm meal, and a shower. The simple things that most people take for granted were now the little joys that he cherished. For the first time in years, he didn't have to worry about where he would sleep or what he would eat. His basic needs were taken care of, and he could finally focus on something else: his future. Elon had arranged for him to meet with one of his trusted business partners, someone who could help him find a job that suited his skills. It was strange for the man to think about working again. The last time he had held a job was so long ago, and his confidence had been shattered. But he was willing to try. He knew this was his chance to turn his life around. As the days went by, the man began to feel like a new person. The exhaustion that had weighed on him for years started to fade. He felt stronger, more hopeful, and more determined to make something of himself. He spent time learning new skills, working on his resume, and even taking classes to improve his education. There were times when the weight of his past tried to pull him down, and he felt like giving up. But each time that happened, he remembered Elon's words, "There's a future waiting for you." Those words kept him going. They gave him the strength to push through the tough days and keep moving forward. One afternoon, Elon called him to check in. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice warm and encouraging. It's going well," the man replied, his voice full of emotion. "I never thought I'd be able to say that. I feel like I'm finally on the right path." Elon smiled. "I knew you had it in you. Just keep going. You're doing great." The man felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the help Elon had given him, but for the chance to rebuild his life. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living again. And so, the transformation began. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, the man could see a future for himself, a future that was full of hope, purpose, and possibility. Weeks passed, and the man's life continued to improve in ways he never thought possible. Each day was a step forward, and although he still struggled with some old habits and fears, he felt a growing sense of pride. He wasn't just being given a chance, he was making the most of it. And he knew that this was just the beginning. Elon had kept his promise. He had helped the man find a job at one of his companies. It wasn't a high-ranking position, but it was a start. The man's new job was at a local Tesla factory, working with a team of people who were patient and kind. They understood his situation and were willing to give him the time and space he needed to learn. It felt strange at first, walking into the factory and seeing all the high-tech equipment. The man had spent so many years feeling out of place that he couldn't believe he was now part of something so big. But as he got to know his coworkers and learned the ropes, something began to change inside him. He began to believe in himself again. His coworkers were supportive, offering guidance and encouragement. They didn't judge him for his past. Instead, they focused on who he was now and what he could contribute. With their help, he quickly adapted to the job. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when he felt overwhelmed, but he kept pushing through. He was determined to prove to himself, and to Elon, that he was worthy of this second chance. As he worked at Tesla, the man began to notice the little things. He noticed how people treated him with respect, how they took the time to teach him new skills, and how they saw his potential. It was a stark contrast to the way he had been treated before, when people simply ignored him or dismissed him as someone who was beyond help. But things weren't just changing at work. Outside of the factory, the man was finding new confidence. He began to make new friends, ones who saw him for who he was, not for his past. He started to engage in activities that made him feel alive again, things he had stopped doing when life became too hard. He began to take care of himself, eating healthier, getting regular exercise, and focusing on his mental well-being. One evening, after a long day at work, Elon called him to check in again. "How's everything going?" Elon asked, his voice warm. "It's going great," the man replied, his voice full of excitement. "I can't believe how much has changed. I feel like I'm actually moving forward for the first time in years." Elon smiled, though the man couldn't see it. "I knew you had it in you. Just keep going, one step at a time. The future is yours." Those words, simple but powerful, filled the man with a sense of pride. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a future that was his to shape, his to build, and his to live. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a person with dreams, a person with a purpose. The journey had just begun, but already the man knew that he was no longer the person he used to be. He had a new life, a new beginning, and he was ready to make the most of it. Months had passed since that fateful day at the tech conference, and the homeless man's life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. What had once seemed like an impossible dream was now his reality. He had found a new sense of purpose, a new family of coworkers, and most importantly, a belief in himself that had been missing for years. At work, he was no longer the man who had walked into the Tesla factory unsure of his place. Now he was a valued member of the team. He had learned new skills, grown more confident in his role, and had even taken on additional responsibilities. His coworkers respected him, and he had earned their trust. The feeling of being part of something larger than himself gave him a sense of pride he had longed for. One afternoon, Elon invited him to meet for coffee. The man was nervous. He had no idea what Elon wanted to discuss, but he also felt a sense of gratitude that he had never felt before. As he sat across from Elon in a quiet cafe, he couldn't help but think back to that moment when he had first met him. He was still amazed at how one simple conversation had turned his life around. "You've come a long way," Elon said, his tone sincere. "I knew you had potential from the start, but what you've accomplished on your own, your hard work, your resilience, it's all been you." The man smiled, humbled by Elon's words. "I never thought I could get this far. It's still hard to believe sometimes, but I know now that I have the strength to keep going." Elon nodded. "I knew you had it in you. You just needed the right opportunity." The man reflected on the past few months. It wasn't just the job or the support from Elon that had made the difference. It was the change in how he saw himself. He wasn't just someone trying to survive anymore. He was someone with dreams, someone who had a future. And that was the greatest gift Elon had given him. The belief that he could make something of himself, no matter where he had come from. Elon leaned forward, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I think it's time to take the next step. We've been talking about your future, and I believe you're ready for even more responsibility. There's an opportunity I'd like to offer you, but it's up to you. What do you think?" The man's heart raced. He hadn't expected this. He had come so far already. But this was something else. Elon was offering him an even bigger chance, one that could change his life once again. "I'm ready," the man said without hesitation, his voice full of determination. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Elon smiled, pleased with his response. "I knew you would be. You've worked hard for this, and I believe in you." As the conversation continued, the man realized just how far he had come. He had been given a chance, a second chance, and he had used it to build something meaningful. But this new opportunity, it was the beginning of something even bigger. For the first time in years, the man felt like he was in control of his life. He wasn't just a man who had been rescued. He was a man who had fought for his future and had earned it. And as he left the cafe that day, he knew that the life he had once thought was impossible was now the life he was living. The future was bright, and he was ready for whatever came next. The man stood in front of his new office building, looking up at the tall glass windows. He couldn't help but smile to himself. Just a few months ago, this had all seemed impossible. He had been living on the streets, with no hope and no direction. Now he was stepping into a future that was full of promise and potential. Elon had kept his word. The man had worked hard, and now he had been offered a new role, one that would challenge him and allow him to grow even further. He had been promoted within the company, and with that promotion came new responsibilities. It wasn't just a job, it was a chance to make a real impact. As he walked into the building, he passed by his coworkers, who greeted him with smiles and respect. They had watched his transformation with admiration, and now they saw him as someone who had earned his place among them. The support he had received from them, from Elon, and from everyone who believed in him had made all the difference. But this was just the beginning. The man knew that he had more to offer, and he was ready to give it his all. He had been given a second chance at life, and he was determined not to waste it. Elon had been right all along. It was all about the opportunity. When someone is given a chance to prove themselves, to show that they can make a difference, it can change everything. The man was living proof of that. He wasn't the same person who had once been invisible to the world. He was now someone who had the power to shape his own future. As he sat down at his desk in his new office, the man couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The day Elon had called him out in the crowd felt like it had been years ago. It had been a turning point, but so much had changed since then. He had worked through the tough moments, and now he was here, in a place where he could thrive. He knew that his story wasn't just his own. There were many others out there, people who felt like they had no way out, no one who believed in them. But he had been lucky. Elon had seen something in him when no one else did. And now he had the chance to give back. Over time, the man started mentoring others who had faced similar struggles. He worked with local charities, helping to provide support and opportunities for people who were homeless or struggling. He knew the value of a second chance, and he was determined to help others experience the same transformation he had. His story spread, inspiring others to believe in the power of change. People started to see that anyone, no matter their past, could rise above their circumstances and create a better future. It wasn't always easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But with the right support, anything was possible. Looking back, the man realized that the most important thing Elon had given him wasn't just a job or a place to stay. It was the belief that he could change, that he could overcome the odds. And that belief had become the foundation for everything that came after. The ripple effect of that moment, when Elon saw him in the crowd and decided to make a difference, had touched more lives than he could have ever imagined. And for the man, it was the start of a new chapter, one where he was no longer just surviving, but truly living.